For nearly half-century, Tirana's skyline barely budged, flattened by communist rule and rigid plans. Now, the same streets are exploding upwards as towers carve a new identity for Albania's capital. How did a city built to keep the world out become Europe's surprise, high-rise phenomenon? And why do critics warn the cost could be its soul? The answer rewrites everything you think you know about transformation. In the decades after World War II, Tirana became a living blueprint for communist ideals. Enver Hoxha's regime reshaped the city from the ground up, replacing old Ottoman bazaars and Italianate boulevards with a grid of low concrete apartment blocks. These buildings, rarely more than 5 stories tall, lined broad avenues cleared of private shops and religious sites. Every detail, from the blank facades to the uniform balconies, reflected a single message: the power of the state over the individual. Public space was carefully managed. Instead of lively markets or bustling squares, Tirana's center became a showcase for regime-approved gatherings. Skanderbeg Square, once surrounded by diverse architecture, was stripped of its past and dominated by the Palace of Culture, a hulking structure that erased the city's old bazaar. Parks replaced private gardens, while streets were named for socialist heroes and milestones. Even the city's skyline was kept deliberately flat, a visual reminder that no one should stand out above the collective. The most striking symbol of this era rose in 1988. The Pyramid of Tirana was built as a museum for Hoxha himself. Its brutalist concrete slopes and sharp lines captured the regime's ambition and its need for monumental propaganda. For years, the pyramid loomed over the city, part mausoleum, part warning to any who might question the system. Tirana's urban plan left little room for improvisation. Housing was assigned, not chosen. Commercial activity was limited to a handful of state-run stores. The city's expansion followed strict rules, with new districts mirroring the same repetitive geometry. Bunkers, another legacy of paranoia, dotted the outskirts and countryside, over 170,000 built across Albania as symbols of vigilance and isolation. By the late 1980s, the city was a portrait of order and control. But beneath the uniformity, pressure was building. The land patterns, the architecture, and even the public spaces all carried the weight of a system that was about to break. What followed would upend everything Tirana's planners had locked in place. Tirana 2030 stands as the city's most ambitious blueprint yet, a master plan designed to break from the flat, rigid logic of the past and point Tirana skyward. Unveiled by Mayor Arian Veliaj and architect Stefano Boeri, the plan was approved in 2018 after years of consultation. Its central idea is simple but radical: build up, not out. By concentrating new construction vertically, the city aims to protect what little green space remains and carve out new parks and pedestrian zones for a swelling population. Population growth is relentless. Since the early 1990s, Tirana's numbers have doubled, pushing past 900,000. Informal sprawl once crept into every open lot, but Tirana 2030 promises a different answer, one rooted in density, not expansion. The plan calls for a ring of 2 million trees, an orbital forest to buffer the city from unchecked development. Alongside these green ambitions, the strategy encourages high-rise clusters in carefully chosen districts, freeing ground level for public life and new infrastructure. Boeri's vision, detailed in the plan's metropolitan fresco and charter of rules, lays out a city of mixed-use towers, walkable boulevards, and polycentric neighborhoods. The general local plan, adopted after sweeping territorial reforms, gives city officials the tools to manage this growth with flexible zoning, standardized building codes, and a focus on sustainable mobility. Bike lanes, new bus corridors, and expanded pedestrian spaces all figure into the city's next chapter. Supporters see Tirana 2030 as a leap into the future, a way to attract investment, jobs, and global attention while addressing the realities of urban crowding. Critics, meanwhile, warn about the speed of change and the risk of losing what makes Tirana unique. For city planners, the logic is clear. With limited land and rising demand, height is no longer a luxury. It is a necessity. The next wave of towers will test just how well this new vision can balance ambition with identity. Rising above Tirana's historic center, the Skanderbeg building is unlike anything the city has seen before. Designed by Dutch architects MVRDV, this planned 150 meters tall tower is more than a feat of engineering. It is a deliberate attempt to recast the city's identity on a national stage. The building's sculpted form draws direct inspiration from Albania's legendary hero, Gjergj Kastrioti Skanderbeg, whose name and likeness are woven into the country's sense of self. MVRDV renderings show a figurative silhouette, its profile echoing the contours of Skanderbeg's helmeted head. The intent is unmistakable: to create a landmark that speaks not just to Tirana, but to the entire nation. Plans call for a vertical mix of apartments, offices, and hotel space, all stacked above ground floor shops and a public plaza. The idea is to turn the tower into a living symbol, an address, a workplace, a place to gather, all wrapped in a single monumental gesture. MVRDV's lead architect describes the project as architecture as a national symbol, arguing that Tirana's new era deserves a skyline with the same confidence as its history. For city officials, this is more than branding. It is a way to attract global attention, investment, and a sense of pride that was long suppressed by decades of enforced uniformity. But the symbolism is not universally embraced. Some residents, especially those who remember the city before the 1990s, question what it means to build a giant figure in the heart of Tirana. For them, the Skanderbeg building risks turning memory into spectacle. One local, whose family has lived near Skanderbeg Square since the communist era, wonders aloud whether a city can truly honor its past by reshaping it into a tower. The conversation around the project is as tall as the building itself. Supporters see a beacon of ambition, while skeptics worry about losing the subtle layers of urban memory that make Tirana unique. Yet the Skanderbeg building is just the beginning. Its planned silhouette on the skyline signals a new chapter, one where architecture is asked to carry the weight of national storytelling. As construction edges closer, the debate over what and who the city's new icons should serve grows louder. Tirana's future, it seems, will be measured not only in meters, but in meaning. On the southern edge of Tirana's growing skyline, a new experiment is rising, the tower known as Hora Verticale. Designed by UDA, a Portuguese architecture firm with a reputation for bold urban ideas, this building is less about symbolism and more about daily life. How to fit the rhythms of a real neighborhood into a single vertical structure. At just over 120 meters, Hora Verticale is not the tallest in the city, but its ambitions run deeper than height. The plans call for layers of apartments, shared amenities, and even a public park, all stacked within a single footprint. The architects describe it as a vertical village, a place where residents might find a grocery, a cafe, a playground, and green open space without ever leaving the building. Inside, the design aims to mimic the social fabric of a traditional neighborhood, turned on its side. Instead of streets and courtyards, there are sky lobbies and communal terraces. The lower levels are set aside for shops and services, space for a bakery, a small clinic, a corner store, while upper floors offer apartments with sweeping city views. The heart of the building is a series of stepped gardens, open to both residents and the public. These green terraces climb the facade, blurring the line between private and communal space. For the architects, this is more than an aesthetic gesture. It is a response to Tirana's land shortage, an attempt to preserve public life in the face of relentless density. The promise of Hora Verticale is that it can restore the sense of community lost to sprawl and traffic. On the ground, a local cafe owner watches construction from his terrace, half hopeful, half skeptical. He has seen the city change before, old neighbors moving out, new faces arriving with each wave of development. He wonders aloud whether a tower can really become a neighborhood, or if it is just another address for the wealthy. For him, the true test will be whether the building's public spaces fill with laughter and conversation, or stay as empty as the plazas built by planners who never lived nearby. Supporters of the project point to its mix of uses and the promise of new jobs. They imagine children playing in rooftop parks, elderly residents sharing benches in the shade, and small businesses thriving in the shelter of a single structure. Critics, though, worry about exclusivity and the risk that these vertical villages will become islands, cut off from the city around them and accessible only to those who can afford the price of entry. The debate is ongoing, but one thing is clear. Hora Verticale is testing whether Tirana's future can be stacked layer by layer without losing the connections that make a city feel like home. At the heart of Tirana's next transformation stands a project that looks less like a building and more like a geological event. Mount Tirana, designed by Danish architects Sibra, is a proposal that takes the wild topography of Albania's mountains and stacks it skyward into the city's growing skyline. The plan calls for a 205-meter tower, nearly 6 times the height of the old communist blocks, to rise from the former military airport zone on the city's western edge. If built, it would be Tirana's tallest structure to date, a jagged, pixelated mass that seems carved by wind and time rather than human hands. Sibra's concept draws directly from the country's landscape. The tower's terraces and green balconies mimic the stratified layers of the accursed mountains, wrapping the glass and concrete core in a skin of gardens and public decks. The architects describe it as turning nature into a tower, a deliberate fusion of national heritage with urban ambition. Mikkel Marker, a partner at Sibra, said that Mount Tirana reinterprets the city's surrounding peaks as a beacon of resilience and growth, stacking public life vertically like stratified rock. Inside, the building is more than just offices or apartments. Plans include a mix of homes, workspaces, hotel rooms, and retail, all connected by a series of public terraces and indoor parks. The podium at the base is designed as a new urban valley, a plaza where residents and visitors can gather, shaded by the building's overhang and lined with native plants. Water collection systems and passive cooling are built into the facade, aiming to fight Tirana's rising summer heat and reduce the environmental footprint of such a massive structure. On the ground, the scale of the proposal is hard to grasp. A construction worker pausing at the site's edge described the project as building a mountain in the middle of the city. For him, it is a chance at steady work and a glimpse of a future where Tirana's skyline rivals those of Europe's largest capitals. For Sibra, Mount Tirana is a statement that the city can honor its natural roots, even as it reaches upward, crafting a new identity out of concrete, glass, and echoes of ancient stone. But the ambition comes with questions. The tower's planned footprint covers ground once reserved for open space, and its promise of new public areas is balanced by concerns about shrinking parks and overloaded infrastructure. Supporters point to the jobs and global attention such a project brings. Critics warn about the risks of Manhattanization and the loss of Tirana's human scale. Watchdogs and residents fear pressure on services as density rises faster than systems can handle. Still, as the city's plans move through public consultations and environmental reviews, Mount Tirana stands as a symbol of how far the city's aspirations have climbed and how much is now riding on the skyline. Is Tirana building a future-proof capital, or trading its identity for a skyline. Would you want this kind of transformation in your city? Tirana's skyline boom is not just a story of bold designs. It is about how the rules have changed and who is taking advantage. After years of rigid, top-down planning, the city's general local plan introduced a new kind of flexibility. Zoning codes now allow for taller buildings in targeted districts, with developers able to negotiate extra height in exchange for infrastructure upgrades or public amenities. This approach, shaped by planners working under the Tirana 2030 vision, has opened the door for rapid vertical growth. Behind the cranes are names that repeat across the city's biggest projects. Nova Construction is linked to Mount Tirana and Bond Tower. Giner 2, led by the Ulaj brothers, holds permits for 5 towers near the artificial lake. Castrati Group and Valiaj Construction, owned by Astrit Valiaj, are behind some of the tallest proposals. Yet the details of who owns what often remain out of sight. Over half of Tirana's 140-plus planned towers pass through opaque approval channels, with limited public disclosure on property deeds or financing. Watchdogs have flagged this lack of transparency, but the pace of permitting continues. For developers, the new system means opportunity. For planners, it is a way to attract investment and accelerate change. The mechanics are simple, flexible zoning, streamlined approvals, and a market hungry for height. The true cost, who benefits, who pays, and what gets left behind, remains at the center of Tirana's urban debate. For many in Tirana, the skyline boom feels like a promise finally being kept. New towers mean more than just glass and concrete. They bring jobs, opportunity, and a sense of momentum. Construction sites now employ an estimated 10,000 workers, from crane operators to architects and cafe owners, serving bustling crews. One young entrepreneur who opened a co-working space near the Lana River credits the city's transformation for his success. He points to the new bike lanes threading through the city center and the greenways, reclaiming the riverbanks. Spaces that, just a decade ago, were overgrown or walled off. Public squares, once empty after dark, now fill with families and students. Supporters of the building boom see these changes as evidence that Tirana is finally catching up to the rest of Europe. They argue that the towers are not just for show. They fuel local businesses, upgrade public spaces, and give young people reasons to stay and invest in their own city. For them, the city's new shape is a sign of hope, not loss. Not everyone is convinced that Tirana's vertical leap is a win for the city. Critics point to the price of progress, literally. In just 6 years, apartment prices have jumped by as much as 65%, putting home ownership out of reach for many families who once lived in the city center. A heritage NGO warns that the rush to build is erasing layers of urban memory as historic neighborhoods and familiar streetscapes give way to glass towers and luxury developments. One longtime resident recently displaced from a low-rise block near the Lana River describes the pain of watching her childhood park disappear beneath a construction fence. It's not just buildings we're losing, she says. It's the places where we grew up, the places that made us who we are. Watchdogs have raised alarms about infrastructure, too. Traffic now clogs roads built for half today's population, and Tirana's aging sewage network is straining under the weight of new density. For every new plaza or rooftop garden, there are questions about shrinking public space and the cost of change for those who cannot afford to keep up. Tirana's towers keep rising, reshaping not just its skyline but its cultural DNA. As global capital floods in, questions of access, identity, and sustainability become urgent, and property prices in central Tirana have doubled since 2017. The city now stands at a crossroads. Will vertical ambition secure its future or erase what makes it unique? Would you want this transformation in your own city? Share your perspective below.